There we
You got
go.
it.
All right. And now are you guys seeing just the screen or are you seeing the one that's like the slideshow? Do you just see the image there with the
The,
little,
the upside image in the water.
I'm sorry, what was that?
They're upside down in the water.
Okay. Actually, that's very high in the air over a ski jump,
Oh, I got you.
unfortunately. All
Okay.
right, here we go. All right. So we have division, riots, crazy politics, depression in global economics, and depression in personal psychology. In fact, suicide rates used to be for people more my age, but almost 3 million adolescents had a major depressive episode last year, and 10 to 20% will have one before moving to adulthood. So reality never really stops coming at us, it seems. And studies regarding like suicide and depression prominently feature the impact of lack of purpose or lack of hope. So hope is extremely important in life. You know, when you think of it, what do you think hope is? I use a basic definition here. I just call it a desire and expectation. So both a desire for something, something good, and an expectation for certain things to happen. Now, when you think, there's a lot of little hopes you might have in life. When you think of your overall hope for your life, though, do you have that hope? Is it reliable or is it more wishful thinking than hope? And we have to be real about this because reality doesn't really care what you're hoping for. It's going to just bring you what it's going to bring you. And a good example of that can be found in the story of Molly Bloom. There's a book and a movie called Molly's Game. And basically, she grew up with a dad who was a psychologist, and he used all he could to push his kids to the highest levels of achievement. So she had a brother who was a two-time Olympic champion, and he was a professional football player for both the Steelers and the Eagles. Her other brother went to Harvard Medical School, is now a surgeon. So now it's her turn. She just is about to get into the Olympics. The two competitors ahead of her in this ski run just made little mistakes. If she just has a good run, then she'd go to the Olympics, she would probably get a medal, and then she would start her nonprofit business. So she has a good plan. Her hopes are looking pretty good. But then there's reality.
Shannon was off balance on her second round. He's talking about Kiki Bandy and Shannon Keeper, my two toughest competitors who had significant point deductions on their final runs. I can make the Olympic team right now. Forget it. And if I have three perfect runs in Salt Lake, the best runs of my life, I can beat the Austrians and the Swiss and have a realistic shot at the podium. Then law school, then a startup, a foundation that seeds entrepreneurial women. My father's at the bottom of the slope, telepathically telling me to check my line. Check your line. I check my line. Good snow contact, calm of the body, legs together, good shape, no line deviation. Set up for the D-spin and stick the landing. Now, two things you need to know before the second trick, which will be a 720. The first is that when visibility is bad the way it is now, race officials toss pine boughs on the course so the skiers have some foreground depth reference. The second is that the tightness of your bindings is determined by what's called a DIN setting. If you're a beginner, your DIN setting is probably a 2 or 3. If you're an experienced weekend skier, it's probably 7 or 8. Mine's 15. My boots are basically welded to my skis, right? So how does this happen? It happened because I hit a pine bough that had become frozen in the snow. And I hit it so precisely that it simply snapped the release of my bindings. Right in that moment, I didn't have time to calculate the odds of that happening because I was about to land pretty hard on my digitally remastered spinal cord, which was being held together by spare parts from an erector set.
So her purposes in life, what her hopes were based upon, seems solid, well calculated. This is a super intelligent, driven, gifted woman with nice purposes for her life and all calculated out. Everything seemed on her side, but life doesn't care. Life ripped it all away. She didn't go to the Olympics, but instead went to the hospital and gained expensive medical bills. She tried to readjust she based her hope on, and began an illegal gambling operation, which she was very successful at and made her very rich. But this too ended up being taken completely from her. Her hope was not reliable, even though it sounded really reliable. What about yours? Is your hope reliable, or will it end up like Molly's? You can actually get an answer to that question. And that's what this talks about. So faithfactcheck.org, that's going to be my website. It'll be up in about a month. It will have some articles on purpose. It'll have this video. And if I can figure it out, I'm going to put a spreadsheet there so you can actually graph your purposes, which we'll see at the end. But now, here are the two questions that we're going to have to answer to determine if your hope is reliable. Does God exist, and what is my purpose in life? Now, you may be wondering how these two questions are related, and even if you recognize how they're tied together, you've probably got to be thinking, all right, these are two of the most impactful, biggest questions in all of life, which the best minds throughout history have written and pondered. I doubt this guy in just a what hour presentation is gonna really give me any kind of reliable answers. Now, that would be the correct thought if the answers depended on me. Thankfully, they don't. The answer to these questions depends on the reliability of the source I use for the answers and the evidence supporting that source's authority over any other source. So here's our goals for today, just three. Have one answer for does God exist? Someone asks you why. If you ever question it yourself, one answer from science to help support that. Number two, the other question, what's the purpose of life, of my life? We can have an answer to that today, a reliable one. And you'll actually be able to see visually how reliable it is with a graph. Now, I'm going to have to get that spreadsheet available online once I figure out how to do that, but I can show you some examples today. All right, so when I'm talking to an audience on this topic, I'll usually ask them, what do you think the purpose of this thing is? And I've heard all kinds of crazy things like swing it around in sand and you can make either draw a perfect small or big circle. I heard someone else say you can tie a bug or a worm to one end and use it as like for fishing. And I usually agree and say, hey, yeah, those are purposes with a little p. So they're not actually the primary or objective purpose for this thing, but you can use it for those purposes with a little p. So how can we know the objective purpose with a capital P of something? Something that, well, there's only one way you can know is you'd have to ask the one who purposefully created it. And thankfully, me and two of my friends are the ones who created this thing. So what the purpose of this thing is, we would wait till it got dark, then we would sneak up to someone's door and we would use that tape to tape it to the like middle of the door. Then we would carefully leave the battery there and unroll the long string of fishing line till we got behind a car or some bushes or something across the street. And then we'd pull the long fishing line so the battery would knock, knock, knock on the door. And then we'd wait until the person opened the door and we'd have to pull back on that long part of the string to keep the battery from hitting it. So the person would open the door, see no one there, get annoyed, shut the door. We'd wait about 2 minutes. We'd make it knock, knock, knock again. They'd come out, open it a little bit more mad. Eventually, we got it so as they were opening up the door, we would make it knock. And then they would swing the door open. And by then, we'd be laughing so hard, they'd know where we were at and we had to take off. So this thing, this is its objective purpose for which it was made. Now, when anything, even a remote door knocker, is created by an intelligent agent, then only the creator can provide the reason or purpose, the ultimate purpose for the creation. This is why the primary big question, does God exist, must be known to answer the secondary big question, what's the purpose of life? And once you have your purposes in life determined, then you can figure out how likely you are to reach them. And we'll show you how to do that. All right. So here's the simple flow chart. What hope do I have for life? Well, you got to answer these two questions. The reason why you got to answer them is because you have a little division here. Um, the answer is going to depend whether there is a purposeful creator who can tell you, communicate what that objective purpose is, or you don't. And once you figure the answer to that question, then you can start determining your purposes. And we'll explain that as we go. All right. So we're going to try to look at the first question. And I'll start with kind of a related question. I did a debate at the University of Michigan, and the atheist who was going around to universities in North America, he had an adult, a graduate, and an undergraduate atheist group bring him in. And then there was a church who brought me in. And one of the questions he asked is, why is the universe so vast if we actually are the purpose? We're special. It's a good question. And I was actually asked this question before this debate. And when when it was first asked, I said, that's a good question. I got to think about that. And when I looked into it, it even got more interesting and a good challenge against whether a God exists or not. So this photograph, if you can see that little tiny blue speck, that's Earth. What happened was when the Voyager 1 space probe did its stuff in the solar system, they started sending it out away from the solar system. But before it got out, I think it was Carl Sagan, he said, spin that thing around and take a picture of Earth. And that's what they got. Now it looks like it's in a beam of light, like it's special, but that's just an optics thing. It has nothing to do, sunlight goes out evenly in all directions. It's isotropic. So, but I tell you, when you see this little blue dot in the vastness of space, it does make you think, ooh, we don't look like we're the main thing here. This picture, you can see size comparisons. You know, that third little ball from the left is Earth, and you can see the comparisons with the sun. And the sun is just tiny compared to some other stars out there, like VY Canis Majoris, the greater dog. That star is just monstrous. And the sun and Canis Majoris are only two stars in maybe 100 to possibly over 200 billion other stars held together in the Milky Way galaxy. And this isn't the only galaxy with hundreds of billions of stars. If you were to go out at nighttime, and you guys are RTB, so you're familiar with Dr. Hugh Ross. This is where I heard a lecture of his. So if you go out, really nice starry sky, and you hold up your hand and if you just considered the space, if you could magnify the space and get a good visual of what's covered by just your little pinky finger, the nail on the pinky finger, this is what you would see. And those aren't stars. Almost everything you see there is a galaxy with 100, 200 billion other stars. And the closest galaxy, the closest major galaxy is Andromeda Galaxy. And let's say you had Yoda was there and he's giving free lightsaber lessons and you wanted to go visit him. Better bring a lot of toilet paper because even if you could travel at the speed of light, that's a 2.5 million-mile trip one way. So that's a lot of generations of people and food and everything else that's needed. So the universe is vast and it's expanding. So that's a great question. Why are we so special? In fact, at the 69th American Humanist Association annual conference, Bill Nye, the science guy, he gave this answer to the question. He's like, I'm insignificant. I'm just another speck of sand, and the Earth is really, in the cosmic scheme of things, just another speck. And the sun is an unremarkable star. Nothing special about the sun. The sun is another speck, and the galaxy is a speck. I'm a speck on a speck orbiting a speck among other specks, among still other specks in the middle of specklessness. I suck. That was his summary. And I like how Bill Nye at least made light of a heavy reality. I don't think he did science well enough because there's a lot more to this question than what he seems to let on, but he made light of it. But many other well-known thinkers, writers, songs, and paintings like this one have displayed the heavier, more practical side of this reality. I think this painting is even called Dust in the Wind, and like the Kansas song, if you ever heard it, and listen to the words to it. It's nihilists understand this grim reality pretty well. Our insignificant speck of self is carried along by forces with only the appearance that we have some control, with no meaning or purpose to our existence, which, because it's just accidentally caused, it can be lost at any time. And all of it, all our thoughts, beliefs, choices, priorities are all controlled entirely by initial conditions and natural laws, if nature and natural are all there is. We would be without lasting or objective value, at least no more than other animals. And you may be thinking, well, we have the capacity to love and sacrifice for family, to be a good person, and choose what purposes in life are. But according to understandings in the diverse fields of science, no, we don't. Here's how Stephen Hawking says it. Though we feel we can choose what we do, our understanding of the molecular basis of biology shows that biological processes are governed by the laws of physics and chemistry, and therefore are as determined as the orbits of planets. Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion says, there is at bottom no design, no purpose, therefore no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference. We are machines for propagating DNA. Francis Crick, co-discoverer of helical structure of DNA, says, you, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. So that is one possibility if there is no God, which the scholars in the diverse fields of study, whether they're atheist or theist, they all agree on this. This is what it would mean, because that's where the evidence goes. But there is another possibility. Life, your life, is special, with meaning and value worth more than all the massive galaxies combined, because a personal creator made it all specifically with us in mind. Now, that sounds really nice, but just because it sounds good that we have real value and importance endowed by a creator with an actual purpose for what we go through in life, that sounds great. Sounds a lot better than the other thing, but it is not evidence that it's true just because it sounds good. So I understand it may seem like there's no way that there can be evidence to supply definitive answers to this question, but that assumption gets overwhelmed when you actually start seeing the answers. And that's what we're going to do right now. So, what hope do I have in my life? If no creators exist, well, then there are only purposes that we make up, and they're all equal. There is no standard of right or wrong or one better than the other. So whether you're the social worker who's helping save families being brutalized by a dictator, or you're that brutal dictator and you just want that kind of life, you can't rank one over the other. It's just you make up your own purposes, no justice behind it. And you don't even really make up your own purposes because, as the quotes were commented on, every atom in your brain is 100% controlled by initial conditions and natural laws, meaning every single thought, choice, belief, or response or priority you have in life is absolutely controlled by nature, not you. So that's the one option. Now we're going to look at evidence for the other side. So why is the universe so vast if we're so special? When I was at that debate, I said, yeah, I'm really glad you brought up that point because it's a sharp point, but unfortunately for atheism, it's a double-edged sword. That thing's going to come right back down and eviscerate your belief system because the answer, why is the universe so vast if we're special, The answer is because it had to be exactly that vast. And this is a great question for it because it gets at the primary big question, does God exist? But also answers the secondary big question of what's the purpose to life. So why does it have to be precisely that vast? Well, natural dis we've discovered a number of things regarding like these features of the universe that seem to be just right. And here's one of them. So when studying the beginning of the universe, we find out that the universe began super dense, super condensed, small, and hot, and starts expanding and cooling off from there. So within those first 3 to 4 minutes of existence, the universe's temperature changed. It went from about 200 billion degrees Celsius, and as it's expanding and cooling, it went down to about 17 billion degrees Celsius, which is like the core of our sun. So it starts using hydrogen that's there, because at the time it was so hot, you had hydrogen, maybe some helium, that's it. And it's the universe starts fusing those and making some other elements. Now, here's the interesting thing about it. Why is the universe so vast? If the mass, and the mass is the mass will tell you how much stuff or matter is in something. And mass density is just how much stuff or matter is within a certain volume. If the if the universe had just slightly more or less mass within those first 3 to 4 minutes, it would have completely changed the elemental makeup. If it had too much mass, we would have had too many heavy elements and not what we needed for life. Um, we would end up with basically a heavy metal universe. Metallica fans would be happy, but they wouldn't exist because we wouldn't be able to have life. If it was a little bit different, all we'd end up with is hydrogen and helium, basically, maybe a few other light elements, but we'd end up with just a hot air balloon universe. Again, no life. And this gravity or this mass or mass density, it even comes to play even more. What they found is at that very beginning, you have just unimaginable forces working. You have an expansion force that's spreading the universe apart, expanding it, and you have gravity, which is trying to pull everything together, an attractive force pulling it all together. And what they found is if the universe had 1 in 10 to the 60th difference in its mass density, and let's just put this in terms just more able to understand. If by chance you were there at the very beginning of the universe and you flicked in a dime's worth, even less than a dime. When Hugh Ross, he was giving a lecture, and when he first made this point, I said, that's ridiculous. There is no way that could be true. So I did the calculation myself, and it was right on. If the universe just happened to have less than a dime's worth more mass, then gravity would have taken over and sucked everything back together, and there'd just be a bunch of neutron stars, giant black holes, no life. If the universe just happened, when you think of all the billions and billions of galaxies and all the matter and energy that's in the universe, if at that very beginning someone had pulled out less than a dime's worth of mass, then everything would have, expansion force would have taken over, it would have flung everything apart, and we just have, again, hot air balloon universe, no life. Now, I use this example because science is always trying to find just natural explanations. That's what science does. Science works, its point of view is finding the natural explanations. So scientists were like, there's no way. This miraculous balance, there's no way. So they thought, well, maybe the mass density, it wouldn't really matter what it was if you had just the right expansion force. So they looked into that. And what they found is the same pattern that we have found ever since we started finding these fine-tuned aspects of the universe. they don't go away. You only find more and they get bigger. So what they found was when they started looking into the space energy density, the dark energy that's in the fabric of space-time, that's actually what's spreading space apart, they found if that had differed by 10 to the 120th, so a lot more than what it was before with just the mass, then we wouldn't be here. And that's just one example. Imagine yourself walking into a music studio. You see this board with hundreds of dials, and these dials have the finest tuning to where if you just bump them at all. So you walk in there and it's playing your favorite song. But then you bumped just one of those dials and it instantly goes to white noise. What are you thinking? Are you thinking this music studio, all the dials were set just right, playing your favorite song by coincidence? Or was it purposely set up by an intelligence that knew you and your needs? Because this is exactly what we see with the universe. And I can go on any size scale. I just gave you the expansion in gravity, which started from the beginning of the universe. So there was no time to evolve and get that right. It started, and expansion in gravity force, that's throughout the whole universe. We can go on to galaxy clusters, galaxies, solar system, planets. There's all kinds of things that you have to get just right. And one of the ones I like using though, I'm going to go to a small example and then even a smaller one. I like using this one because I like the fact that on any night where you can look up and see the moon, you're seeing a miracle. Because the Earth is not the way the Earth was supposed to be. At Earth's position with our type of sun, it shouldn't have a moon this size, number one. It also wobbled on its axis and had which made things very unstable. It also was the rotation speed was amazing. We had winds, 1,000-mile-an-hour winds plus, actually. And there was also not enough radioactive material for plate tectonics. There wasn't enough iron material to get into our center of the Earth either for a few things. But scientists have done computer simulations, and what they say is there was a body close to the size of Mars that hit Earth early in Earth's beginning. And what happened is when it hit, it gave Earth all the radioactive and other heavy metal elements it needed. It blew away that toxic atmosphere. We had a toxic atmosphere, kind of like Venus. It blew that away. And then when it became the moon, it stabilized our tilt wobble. It also slowed down, it gave us drag, so it slowed down our crazy rotation speeds. It provided plate tectonics, which allows the continents formation, obviously. And here's the neat one. It created like a force field like you'd see in science fiction. This is the magnetosphere, and it allows life to exist on Earth's surface. Without it, the Earth would be just constantly bombarded by both cosmic from the universe and solar from the sun radiation. Um, and what happened is once you get this, the kind of core that we have now, it was able to set up this magnetosphere. And as you can see in the image, the radiation, it gets shielded away from the Earth. Now, you might notice there is little areas where some of that, there is some radiation that gets in, but look where it goes. It goes right to the poles, which are not population centers, number one. But number two, the Earth has a second layer of defense mechanisms because when those rays come in, they then crash into the atmosphere and they collide with some oxygen and nitrogen molecules. And basically, you can see what the second layer of protection gives us. It gives us the northern lights, the aurora borealis. That's what's causing it. So every time you're looking at the moon, you're looking at a miracle. And like I said, we can go on any size scale, the whole universe down to planetary size, even down to subatomic. So Stephen Hawking has some quotes as far as he cites some of these differences. Like he said, he talked about the size of the proton versus size is, 1,836 times more mass than the electron. If this ratio were much different, molecules wouldn't form. He also goes on to say the negative charge of the electron, if it was only slightly different, stars would either be unable to burn hydrogen and helium, or else they would just explode. Either way, no life. And Hawking says the remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. Here's that nasty periodic table you might have had to memorize in your chemistry class. Mike Strauss, physicist, he did some studies on the strong nuclear force. And strong nuclear force is it's this is what's holding the protons together. And it's really holding the nucleus together. You got the protons and neutrons, you have the up quarks, the down quarks with the gluons mediating the force. If what Mike Strauss found is the if the strong nuclear force was just 5% weaker, then chemistry class would be real easy because here's the only thing you'd have to remember. Only hydrogen would exist. If by chance it was 2% stronger, then we would only have the heavy elements with radioactive properties, which is very destructive to us in those abundances. So again, just right. So, whoop, I'm going to stop that part of it. So this picture was taken from a reasonable faith little summary video on the teleological or fine-tuning argument. Good summary video. We're going a little bit more in depth, but that's a nice one to show people, and it just catches interest. It's done well. So for those who we just gave some science. Now we're going to go to straight philosophy logic. This is logical argument. If the premises are true, then the conclusion is inescapable. If the premises are only, let's say, 60% true, well, then the conclusion is 60% likely, and so on. So here's the argument. Fine-tuning, we find a number of fine-tuned features in the universe where these initial conditions, these constants, these quantities, these balances are just right. It's like a Goldilocks universe. My physics professor wrote a book with that title. So premise one, the fine-tuning of the universe, it's well established, well accepted in the peer-reviewed literature of science. The well-established fine-tuning of the universe is due either to necessity, chance, or design. Premise two, the fine-tuning is not due to necessity or chance. Conclusion, therefore, the fine-tuning we see of the universe is a result of intelligent design. Now, science has already shown that it's not due to necessity. For example, I try sometimes when I go in front of an audience, I'll say something, it comes off really creepy, but it grabs their attention. I said, everybody in this room is attracted to me. And then I'll say, well, of course, every chair is, every piece of furniture, every pencil is. Anything that has mass, any two things that have mass have a force of attraction between them. And you can calculate it. In this, you can see the little equation here. That's the force right there. G is the gravitational constant. It's the same number anywhere, always in the universe, doesn't change. And M1 and M2 are the two masses. For example, the little girl and the mass of a sun. You can calculate the force of attraction between them, and R is a distance between them. And you can see, for example, if the girl, let's say she weighed 100 pounds on Earth, you can see in the chart, the force between her and the Earth is what we measure in weight. 100 pounds, we'll say. If she was on Jupiter, which has a lot bigger mass, she'd weigh 253 pounds. If she was on a white dwarf star, she'd weigh 130 million pounds and she'd be crushed into a little puddle. So you can calculate the force. Now, that G there, that constant of gravity, There is no, we have the exact value of what it is, but there is no reason it has to be that. If you want to claim physical necessity, you basically have to say that all these fine-tuning features just had to be exactly what they are. They couldn't be anything else. But we found that's not the case. None of these things do not, they're independent from natural laws. In fact, if you want a theory of everything, they've been trying to work on a theory of everything and they're trying to use string theory and other things. Even with those examples, they're coming up with you could have 10 to the 500 different universes with all kinds of different numbers and things. In fact, uh, medal winning physicist and agnostic author Paul Davies, he just summarizes it. He said the physical universe does not have to be the way it is. It could have been otherwise. So physical necessity just doesn't work. Well, all right, if it's not necessity, what about chance? Does chance have a chance? No. Aside from the example we gave with the expansion of the universe, the moon, things in the atom being just right, things even in the strong force within the subatomic atom being just right, here is an entire list. We could go through thing after thing after thing after thing after thing. I mean, this would be talk after talk after talk. Um, Astrophysicist Hugh Ross, whom you're familiar with, he's been taking this to universities and scientific groups across the world. I mean, dealing with top scholars. And I've been to a number of these events. You can even watch one with him and Victor Stanger with 700 skeptics at Caltech, if you want an example of it. He has shown them these fine-tuned features and the probabilities that were assigned to them. Like, how likely could this have happened by chance? And what he finds in event after event after event is that the scientific community accepts these fine-tuned features, but when Hugh Ross, when he adds up multiplies all the probabilities, which is what you got to do to get a final answer. Sometimes they're different by up to like 24 orders of magnitude. But when you're talking about odds going into the thousands, that's minuscule. So they're in agreement with this fine tuning. But where does that leave us then? And let's just put this into a little bit numbers we can understand. Now, I'm not sure. I can't remember the source where I got this, so just take it for a grain of salt. But you can look into it. And I know, unfortunately, they do have data of people falling out of airplanes without a parachute. So they do have some data. But what I had heard from one of the sources was your likelihood of falling without a parachute is 1 in 10 to the seventh, meaning 1 in 10 million. You have a 1 in 10 million chance of falling on an airplane without a parachute and not dying. All right. Here's one. I saw this Mega Millions lottery, and I saw that it was up to like 200 million at the one that I looked at. And what I did was I did a calculation of what are the odds of winning if you buy one ticket. All right. Now, what if a person bought one ticket, won the Mega Millions, and all right, great. That nothing special. Someone's going to have to win. But what if that person got greedy and the next time it came around, they bought one ticket and won again? And then they bought the next time it came around, they bought one ticket, won again. They did that 14 times in a row. What are you thinking? How lucky? Or are you thinking there's something going on behind the scenes here? Well, the odds of winning the lottery, 14 Mega Millions, 14 times in a row, are 1 in 10 to the 115. The odds of getting just the expansion right at the beginning of the universe is 1 in 10 to the 120th. When some people try to say, oh, well, with enough time and enough stuff, anything can happen. No, you can test that claim mathematically. If every atom in the universe, all 10 to the 80th power of them, every second since the beginning of the time, and let's say there's 14 billion years, we'll say, if every atom in the universe at every second had another chance to be its own universe and try to get just the expansion force right, it still would fall short. Chance has no chance. And that was only one thing. There are hundreds of things that Dr. Ross and others have listed that are just right in our universe. And the odds are unfathomable. Stephen Hawking said, we read this quote from him before. Fred Hoyle, another atheist, he said, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests a super intellect has monkeyed with physics, that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. The numbers one calculates from the facts seem to me so overwhelming as to put this conclusion almost beyond question. Nobel Prize winner. Astronomy leads us to a unique event, a universe which was created out of nothing, one with very delicate balance needed to provide exactly the right conditions required to permit life, and one which has an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. I'm going to skim through some of these other quotes just because for time, but they're endless. But there is a nice one from the Bible that says the exact same thing. The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. And now we're bringing in that knowledge and showing there is a purposeful creator. This was a query done from Science Direct by Luke Barnes, physicist. It only goes up to 2011, but you can see trends overwhelm people's opinions, preferences, and biases. There is a trend pointing exponentially towards a purposeful designer. These are just the number of articles per year of peer-reviewed science showing fine-tuning feature that's not explained naturally. All right, so we talked about few examples. There's so many more. It's like artistry to me. It's like I love the art where you look really close and there's just these dots seeming kind of random, but when you put them together, it makes a beautiful picture, and that's what we have with this universe. All right. So here's a fine-tuning argument. Um, those are only options in premise one. Premise two, we already showed by science, it's not by necessity. Chance has no chance. Therefore, it's purposeful design, unless you're dealing with the multiverse. Now, the multiverse, let me see how much time I want to get to the purpose part, so I'm going to skip through this, but I'll have a whole paper on this on the website. Basically, the multiverse model, we have scientists saying you either have to believe in God or you have to believe in an almost infinite type multiverse. I wouldn't, I'm fine with even, I don't know, bubble universes, whatever. You would need a basically infinite multiverse, like a max Tegmark level 4 multiverse, to make up for the fine tuning. And it has a lot of problems. We're not going to get into them right now. Um, let's get to the purpose. And in questions, we can go over them in the questions if you want. So, fine tuning, there's a purposeful designer. All right, I'm going to skim through this part. Okay. So, if you want to know what your objective, ultimate purpose for life is, you got to ask, you can only ask the one who created it purposefully. If there isn't one who created it purposely, then there is no purpose. You just make up your own. So, what's the purpose of my life? We got to ask, does God exist or not? If no creator exists, there's only purposes we make up, and we don't even really make those up because every atom in our brain is controlled by natural laws. We do not have free will. Now, um, if a purposeful creator exists, though, we not only have an ultimate purpose with a capital P, which you can look in the Bible yourself and see what it is. I would summarize it as know God and make him known. So love God and help others get that relationship too, and love others as well. But there's also other purposes we have in life. I mean, and this is recognized in the Bible too. You have secondary purposes, not with a capital P. You have an ultimate purpose and secondary purposes, and some purposes are better than others. There is a standard that can be judged against. Now, the hope that we have of achieving these purposes Now it is anchored by an authority who would not only know because this universe was created by that authority, but also would be in the position to enforce it. So this is a lasting hope. It doesn't go up and down with what life throws at you. It can actually be a lasting, reliable hope. And there's a feedback loop. If you haven't, if you're not a Christian, um, you try that relationship, you'll see a feedback loop. You'll try your purposes, see how it's impacting your life and your hope. And if there is a God that exists, then his truths will kind of reinforce that. If there is no God, even if your life is going the best it possibly can, everything you hold is like in a wet paper bag. At any moment, it can be taken from you without your control, and eventually it absolutely will, because you're not bringing it with you. But as we've seen, based on the fine-tuning evidence, and I haven't even gone into any of the other talks that I'll do as far as showing that there's a purposeful creator, the right side here goes dark because that's not really an option. The evidence shows that there is a purposeful creator. So we got to be over on this left side operating if we want a reliable, secure hope. All right. Do we have an answer for does God exist? You have the fine-tuning examples. What now we want to get to what's the purpose of life, of your life? And I want to show you, without the spreadsheet being done, we can't, but I'll give you an example just to show you, and I'll make the spreadsheet available when the website's up. But you can actually visualize how reliable your hope is, your likelihood of reaching your purpose. All right. What I want you to do right now is think of the most important things in your life. Because what I'm trying to get at is what are your purposes for living? Now, if there's a God, your worldview beliefs, which includes your relationship with God, um, that would be your primary purpose. It should be if you're being logical, if you're being reasonable. Um, but there's definitely other purposes. Take a look at some of these purposes. And remember how important it is how much is it going to impact you? Quantity, like how often is it going to impact you? And quality, how much is it going to impact you? This is how you kind of rank things as far as importance. So think of what might be your top five most important things in your life that are your purposes. Just think about that. There's some other things to think about, but we'll skip past that. Typically, what I'll do, this will be on my website, but I also do this as a handout when I'm giving a presentation. We kind of analyze different ultimate purposes to be happy. Should that be your ultimate purpose? Or maybe a relationship with family and friends, or maybe being a good person, or maybe loving God and loving others. I have more. This is just the first four. But it'll be on the website. I think, honestly, if you're talking about quantity and quality of impact, if there is a God that exists, there's a creator who created all of this. I think they would be in the position to know. And I think the impact from that would dwarf anything else you'd have on Earth. But we still have to live here on Earth. So we're going to have to make it look more something like this. So pick five things that are your most important in life. And I would rank them from one to five. And then I want you to do a thought experiment. Let's say before you were born, you were given the opportunity to have 100 diamonds. And these 100 diamonds, you had to divide up into your five most important purposes. Now, what each diamond represents is probability that you're going to succeed in that area. So, out of your 100 diamonds that you're going to divide up among your five purposes, you would put most of them where it's most important for you to succeed. This will show how you rank your top five purposes. That is your relative importance shown in the blue cones there. Then what I would ask you to do is analyze an average month of your life. You have to do this in your head, but the more accurately you do it, the more accurately you're going to get a visual of your own life. What percentage out of 100, now 100 diamonds is what you divide up for your importance before you're born. Now we have 100% of your free time to divide up. Now, I'm not talking about the time you have to do work stuff, family stuff, eating stuff, health stuff. There's stuff that takes up our time that is always going to take up your time. I'm not talking about that. When everything else is done and you are absolutely free, what do you put your time into? So if, for example, you had in an average month, you put 20% of your free time into entertainment, then I would put a 20 next to, it's not on this one, but I would put a 20 next to fun or to be happy. If you spent 50% of your free time, his kids are going to be leaving the nest soon, so he's spending probably 80% of his free time on family stuff. He would put an 80 next to family. So if you see what I'm doing, when I have a spreadsheet, it'll kind of look like this. You will list and I do have the spreadsheet. It's just putting it up on the website so that you can download it and enter your own numbers and then visually get your own graph. So the little blue column, that's where you invest your 100 diamonds. The red column, that's where you invest your percentage of free time. And as you can see, it'll graph it out for you. There's a lot of times there's a difference between what you say is your biggest purposes in life and what you actually live out as your most important purposes in life. And so the actual rank comes out. So now, for example, if for this person, this was an actual person who did these top five, they said God was their second most important. But then look how much time they put in towards God. And this could be me. I mean, I do this a lot. My actual investment into relationship with God is a lot less than it should be for its priority. Enjoy life or be happy. This person was honest enough to rank that as their most important. That's what they were going for. To them, that is their purpose in life, even more so than God or anything else. And they put the most amount of their free time towards it. So the likelihood that their hope is going to get realized is about as good as it can get as far as enjoying life or be happy. Now, there's stuff you can't control, obviously, but what you can control, this person is going for it for as far as enjoying life. Now, they say their work is not a big priority in life, but they're putting so much of their free time into it that this becomes their number two purpose in life. So the likelihood that they're going to reach their goals in work is higher, or at least their likelihood of what they control to have success in work is higher, but other things get sacrificed. You can see family is a little bit lower than it is, so their hope for their family success is going to be lower, as is their relationship with God. All right. So it does seem most people, when you ask them, well, does God exist? What's the purpose of my life? They're like, that's two big questions. There's no way we could possibly answer that. But did they even look? Because when you look, the flowchart makes it pretty easy. Either God exists or doesn't, and that's going to impact what kind of purposes. Because if God doesn't exist, then you only have purposes that you make up. None of them are better than anyone else's, and you don't really make them up because if it's only nature and natural laws, you don't have any free thought anyway. Or there's a purposeful God that does exist. In that case, there is an ultimate purpose, loving God, loving others. And there are also other purposes in your life. And the important thing for us is to get a good visual of what is our hope going towards those purposes. So, whatever our top five is, whatever the order is, we should be devoting about an equal amount of free time percentage to what we rank it as. And if we do that, that's the best we can get. And as far as your hope in the overall big picture of an eternity, which is going to dwarf what goes on here, because we see a purposeful God exists, if we have that relationship, then it is the only way in this life to have reliable hope because it is not based on you or what life throws at you. It is based, one, on the authority in a position to know and enforce the promises of that hope. All right. So I think I finished right about on time and ready for any Q&A.
Anyone has a question, you're gonna hold this like this, unusual.
You guys can send us a copy of this webpage.
He can.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Anyone have a question over here?
I'd like to see.
I tell him what Sid just
Yeah,
said.
yeah, Scott,
Yeah.
Sid wants to get you to send those, your website.
All right, will do.
That's okay.
Yep, it's faithfactcheck.org, but I'm gonna get my I'm gonna write myself a note to make sure I get that.
You want a question? You want to hand this around? Hand it around, see if anyone else.
Right, question. Anyone,
If anyone wants to know
So,
why the multiverse doesn't work, it's fantastic for science fiction. I love it for that. But as far as science, that's where it has its problems. But if you want some
yeah,
answers for that,
we were talking about that. It seems like Marvel comic books has done more to promote the idea than anything I know, So, I mean, we'd all been talking about it, saying it's incredible, it doesn't work. And then suddenly, Doctor Strange is doing the multiverse. All these kids are saying that. Well, of course, no, I'm not kidding. Everyone really thinks there's a multiverse because it's on Marvel.
you are very
That's
right. Here's the other scary thing. I made a prediction a couple decades ago when I started seeing how strong in the science, philosophy, history, the evidence is so far on one side for the biblical God. No other belief systems remotely approaches the evidential support. I was wondering where are they going to turn? So claiming that there's no real truth, there's relative truth, that's one way to do it. Another way is I think at some point, and I said this about 20 years ago, they're going to start saying, okay, well, there is this being that, yeah, we can admit there's a supernatural entity that brought the universe in and so on. But I think they're going to end up claiming that God is an alien that we're not responsible for and we should actually actively go against because it's trying to dominate us. And that's a decent way to try to avoid the evidence. And I've already been seeing it. There's a series, Supernatural, where they explored that topic. There is really, I've seen it in a lot of different places now. So,
well, that's actually, I don't know if you've ever heard of Lady Gaga, right?
I have.
She's hugely popular singer, and she starts one of these songs. I just happened to go across it, and that's exactly the theme that she came up with.
What?
That God,
Really?
yeah, it's this alien, but he's bad. We got to get rid of him. But the real God is actually Satan. She's describing is the one we should be embracing. I mean, she's oh my gosh, So, but
Oh, so
I think one of the interesting things about the multiverse is a lot of the string theorists were describing the possible extra universes, and you had Leonard Susskind and other people. But now, who's the physicist Samantha? Kind of an Australian lady. She just blows up the multiverse and string theory and all these things. And I enjoy watching her. You know what I'm talking about?
no, I don't. I'll have to check her out. And I didn't know about that Lady Gaga song. I wrote that as a note. Thanks for that. I,
Yeah, it's scary.
it is
It's pretty
scary.
scary.
I
Yeah.
gave a
Well, I
whole
mean, she's acting like she's kind of a Christian when she's really not. And she's the most popular. I mean, that song was watched over 1 billion times.
Are you
So it's
kidding?
yeah, hugely influential. So anyway,
Well,
how about
I was afraid that was going to happen. I actually ended up doing a talk, and if you guys want it, I can do it sometime on aliens. Where are you? Just because I wanted to show the science as far as aliens, and they had the whole thing with there's unidentified flying objects, which yeah, they're unidentified flying objects, but you should hear the science involved and the new stuff coming out. It's a really interesting topic.
Actually, I think we would enjoy that. We did hear one of our colleagues did that on the aliens. And
Really? Who did it?
what I found interesting is, the government had to release this information. They stuck it in a bill somewhere, and Marco Rubio, who was on the head of the committee or whatever, he came out and said they're there, but we don't know what they are, and that's all he could say, which is
Wow.
all anyone could say. And that was 2 or 3 years ago. He said that. So, these scientists say these things are, these UFOs, they're making turns and they're accelerating away faster than the physical laws are possible. A biologic inside of there's no tungsten or anything that could suddenly turn 90
Right.
degrees and accelerate.
So
So,
yeah,
Hugh Ross goes into, he believes that they're basically fallen angels. And it makes complete sense, so.
well, the scientists involved now, they're starting to say they're agreeing with us. They're saying they're interdimensional beings. And
Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
another
And
interest, oops, go ahead.
yeah, well, the colleague of ours that spoke last year believes that there are some skunkwork stuff to allow these faster than light, vehicles. But we find it kind of unusual. But supposedly there were some patents to that effect. But how do you believe that, right?
Yeah, there's so much of that, but you could just do the physics on it, and that's what I kind of focused on because even if you did have something that could travel like that, there's a lot of other things that they just don't take into account. Like if you're trying to use one of those, what is it, an Albuquerque warp drive, when you stop, you'll basically kill everything in front of you because of the
Yeah.
radioactive that you're kicking off when you're stopping. I mean, there's so many neat aspects to it.
Is that the formula that the Mexican mathematician discovered? There was a Mexican mathematician about 10 years ago that discovered how to actually bend space in a way.
Yeah, I think that was
Mathematically.
him. I think that
Yeah,
was
mathematically it seemed like it worked. All right.
Hey, Glenn, would you ask him if he's giving this presentation to college students and what's been the reaction?
Yeah, did you hear that? Have you given this talk to college students and what kind of reactions you're getting?
depends on the audience. If it's a Christian audience, a lot of times, well, it depends. So, um, with a Christian audience, there's a lot of excitement because they're not aware this information's out there. Um, with a non-Christian audience, it's they don't really push back on it much. What they do is their questions that they hit me with at the end change. So they're not really attacking the science. What they'll say is, so you're saying your belief system's right and every other belief system's wrong.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, have you heard of the law of non-contradiction? That's the only way it can be. They all contradict each other. Only one at most is going to be right. It's just whoever has the best evidence wins. So, yeah, because nothing remotely approaches the evidential support that biblical Christianity has. Because that same purposeful God that we find in the fine tuning also provides very checkable knowledge beyond human capacity because it predicted. I can give you dozens of things about the beginning and cause of the universe that only the Bible got right. That sounded absurd at the time, but science proved was accurate thousands of years later. Um, so that's what I usually get from non-believers. They don't push back too much, but Christians, they usually get excited if I explained it well. If I go too fast and didn't explain it well, then they're just kind of there wide-eyed, and I have to go back.
We'd love to have you again, and I want to thank you for your talk. I want to get my clap here.
Well, thank you very much.
And maybe later this fall or something.
Yeah, just let me know when. Did I answer that question decent as far as what you were looking for as
Yeah.
far as audience response?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Do you want to have anything else? I think that about wraps it up.
Oh,
All right. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
yeah. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
If anybody cold besides me,
All these guys with short ranges are really cold.
how cold? You gotta be pleased.